host, Joshua Solomon, and JP is still out rounding up communists and throwing them back over the state line into Massachusetts where they belong. Hopefully he'll be joining us next week to tell us all about his exploits rounding up the communists and putting them where they belong. Tonight, before I introduce the guests, we're going to go through the regular stuff. I apologize. The Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades is sponsored by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, the oldest sports shooting club in New Hampshire, located right here in Manchester at 1732 Lakeshore Road. We have open membership. We do not have a waiting list like other firearms clubs in the state. Our membership meeting is the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. right after this show. You can reach us at wilsonhillpistol.org, where you can get the schedule and see training schedule. Our next training is April 25th. It's a Saturday. It is the FAST handgun, which is the fundamentals in safety training. That's what FAST stands for. It's our beginner level class. It's the best class to take if you're looking to protect yourself and buy a firearm. Get familiar with it. Be safe. Tonight, we have a returning guest. One of our favorite guests is the Honorable Captain Lynn Blankenbeker, Esquire, LPN.
RN.
RN. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, see, I blew it.
It's all good. It's all good.
Did I get all the titles?
All of them.
Did you get any new ones since I last saw you?
Probably my favorite title's Mom, but
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've just got so much under your belt as far as all of these titles. You've done so many things.
Well, that's the beauty of being born a woman in the United States of America. You know, the opportunities are limitless. You can do whatever you want to do. And so I was really fortunate. I had parents, even though we didn't have a lot of money, I had parents who really supported me in all my crazy adventures and, you know, and encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do. And then, you know, opportunity knocked and I took advantage, opened the door, took advantage. And so next thing I knew, all these years later, I got a very unwieldy resume.
Yeah. And speaking of crazy adventures, every time I see you, you have just come back from some crazy adventure, right? Whether
Yes.
it's on the other side of the world in American Samoa,
Yeah.
or traveling through the Panama Canal on a cruise ship.
Yeah, we were on a cruise ship for that one.
Lately, I've been spying on you on Facebook. You've been in Europe recently.
Yes, we went to Bavaria for Christmas to do the Christmas markets.
Christmas markets.
Which was so much fun. We did 7 countries in 15 days.
7 countries?
Yeah, well, you know, that area is very compact.
A couple days per country.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, we some days we did 2 countries in a day. Liechtenstein is an amazing little country. It's about the size of Concord, New Hampshire, population-wise. But they still have a king. They have a castle. It was built in the 1100s, I believe. The prince still lives in it.
That's not. What's the other country over there that starts with an L? That's where Patton is buried.
Oh, Luxembourg. I don't know. Luxembourg, yeah. Yeah, so we did, we started in Prague, and then we went to, oh my goodness, we started in Prague, then we went to Budapest, I think, Hungary, and then we went to Bratislava, which is in Slovakia. And then we went to, oh my goodness, I can't even remember anymore. We went to Austria. We spent a bunch of days in Austria. So, cool story. My husband, his family, his ancestors are from Austria. And many years ago, my husband started doing his genealogy and kind of tracking his way back. And he has his genealogy, I think it's back 14 generations. They've been in the United States for 10 generations. And so his clan, they were Blankenbekers at the time. The Blankenbeker brothers came over on this ship from Austria, and then they split off, and one brother went to Indiana, or the Indiana area. Anyway, they ended up being indentured servants across the United States. So he tracked his family back. They did settle for a while in Spotsylvania, and if you ever go to Spotsylvania, Virginia, you'll see there's a Blankenbeker Street. The cemetery, every headstone has Blankenbeker on it. The oldest Lutheran church in this country that's still in holding services was the Hebron Valley Church right there that his ancestors started. But prior to that, they were Blankenbekers. So the name kind of, changed over time. So when we got to Austria, we went to Grestenland, which is where his family's from, and went to the original farmhouse that his grandfather 13 times back, my daughter's great-grandfather 14 times, went to the farm, and the farmhouse, a wall of it is still standing. If you can believe that. Yeah, so my daughter and my husband got to stand on the soil that their blood ancestors came from. And this little man in the cutest little Austrian felt hat, didn't speak a word of English, with a cane, came down the driveway. It was a very sloped driveway, and came down and met us. And then his son came, and in my broken German and their very broken English, we were able to establish that they were family. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was very cool.
That's always a lot of fun. I embarked on the idea of researching my lineage as well a few years ago now. But I use, what's the one that everybody uses online?
Like Ancestry.com or
I don't use that one,
something.
but FamilyTree.com is completely free. And it's run by the Mormon Church.
Oh, yeah, they're really into
They've got
genealogy.
the biggest genealogy database in the world. Yeah. And so I started, plugging everybody in, and I got back 4 or 5 generations. And I hit some roadblocks on certain trees, and
as long as it didn't go in a circle.
No, it didn't go in a circle. But so then I made a phone call, and I asked my father, I said, what was your grandmother's maiden name, right? And her name was Sarah Jane Lauder, right? So I plugged her in, and as soon as I plugged her in, the family tree just shot way out.
Yeah.
And she and just like what you said, the name changed. Here in the United States, her name was Lauder, but once it went back to Ireland, it was Lowther, right? And so it was louder.
It's the difference in the accent or whatever.
Right, the accent got it. The spelling changed once they came to the U.S. And so I know where my ancestral home is in Westmeath, Ireland, but you just keep clicking on the links and going back, and there's Lowther Castle in Scotland, or it's on the border between Scotland and England. But there's Lowther Castle. They have an annual event there every year, but it's open to the public to be toured. So I'm going to go over there someday, and I'm going to walk in like I own the place.
You should. The funny thing is that the piece of the remnant of the farmhouse that's still standing, it's a stone wall. They're going to tear it down, and so my daughter is in the process of building a house in Loudon, and so she got a hold of the Historical Society of Grestenland, where her family's from, and asked them if she could have some stones to put in her fireplace at her house. So I think that's ridiculously cool. And if they can't ship them over, she'll just fly over and get them, because where are you ever going to get stones from, where you literally, your genealogy started, or at least as
That's
far
the
back
other
as
thing
we
I
can
like
get.
about traveling Europe. I've been over multiple times, into Eastern Europe, Poland, and I've even been to Russia. I've been to St. Petersburg, Russia. But what's amazing to me when you're touring those countries is the amount of history you can see and the buildings that are still standing. Like you said, there are buildings. I stayed in a hotel, or more like a bed and breakfast, in Reading, England, that a king from the 1200s had stayed in, right? King George whatever, you stayed here 500 years ago.
Right.
We don't have...
No, the oldest building in this country is 250 years old, technically.
Exactly. We don't have 500 years of history, never mind 1,000 years of buildings. Right.
No, it is very
cool. It's amazing.
And the preservation, we went to this village in Rothenburg, Germany, I felt like I fell out of a medieval storybook. It was so beautiful. It had, the original walls around, and they were so well preserved in all the buildings inside and the little cobblestone streets. It was just amazing. Yeah. So we had a really good time. It was cold, but it was good. We were laughing, my daughter and I, on the way over here. We were like, where were we last year for Thanksgiving? We were like, oh my God, did you remember we ate schnitzel for Thanksgiving? So, and then we sort of reminisced about all these Thanksgivings we've spent, where we were, what we ate, kind of how we celebrated holidays in other countries or whatever. But we're going to Morocco in November, again for Thanksgiving, and that'll be our 50th country. So
really?
Yeah, which
so
is very exciting.
It's like a full third of all the countries in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty close. There's not many. Yeah, there's not. I don't know how many exactly there are, but yeah, we're pretty close. So, so it's our goal, I guess, to hit every continent. We still got Antarctica to go, and then to hit every country if we can before. I know some of them we probably wouldn't go to Iran this week. But there's some that are off our bucket list, right? Hey, before we get any farther, I want to give a shout out to JP. I just want to say hi. I'm sorry, I know he's probably listening. And so JP, we're glad to hear you're doing well, and I hope you continue to improve every single day and get back on the show soon. So
he's eager.
I bet. I talked to him earlier.
Yeah. So
yeah, but
let's see what else is going on. Oh, that's the other thing. We were talking about your opportunities, adventures and opportunities. The last time we spoke, you were just wrapping up your tenure at the Pentagon, and you were gonna take on some new responsibilities here back at home.
Yeah. No, I came back here and trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was looking at. I was looking for that last job. What's the last thing that can be really impactful and really make because I've always been about public service. I don't know why I always gravitate to a public service job. I've never really wanted to go into the private sector and make my millions. And, I've always wanted to sort of serve the state or serve the nation in some way, shape, or form. And so I was contemplating that when Paul Halverson, who's the county attorney over at Merrimack County, where I live, called me up and said, hey, Lynn, I got this job. It's kind of a weird job, but it's temporary. It's a pilot. It's it's a part-time job. Are you interested? And I said, sure, I'll come do it. Help you out while I'm kind of figuring out where I want to land softly for the rest of my working days. And so I went over there and worked. Had a great experience. And Paul then announced he wasn't going to run for county attorney in 2026. And so I thought, just came off some leadership jobs, not afraid of campaigning a little bit. This might be a right fit for me. So I, already had a relationship with the folks in the office. So I actually announced I was going to run for county attorney over in Merrimack County, and literally, I think the announcement came out on Friday, and on Sunday, Governor Ayotte called me and said, Lynn, I really need you at the Adult Parole Board. Is there any chance, I'd really like to nominate you for that. So I went through the nomination and the confirmation process with the Executive Council. And so now I'm the new chair of the Adult Parole Board, which is a 5-year appointment. So I work in Concord, still in public service, and it's a full-time job. And, we're working on making sure that we get the parole process right so that we, part of our mission statement is we've got to keep the community safe, but making sure that we also ensure that the folks who are, again, parole is not a right, parole is a privilege, but parole is used as an incentivizer to get incarcerated folks to do their rehabilitation, and then we give them a little credit for their rehabilitation. And the way the parole process works, and I didn't even understand it before I became the chair there, I think a lot of folks have the belief that we let people out early. And that is really not the case. When a court case, when a criminal case goes through the court system, or when a plea agreement is met, there's a minimum sentence and a maximum sentence. And so nobody, we don't start looking at people, well before their minimum sentence. And then while they're incarcerated, they can do programs to rehabilitate themselves. There's anger management programs. And by the way, the state of New Hampshire has about a 43% recidivism rate from parolees. That sounds really high. I thought that was high.
It does sound high.
The nation is 60%. We're the lowest. We're one of the lowest. And the reason is, I believe, is because we have such exceptional programming. And so we have rehabilitation programs in place to, if the inmates will take advantage of those, really pay attention to those, turn their lives around. You can course correct, some people, whether it's substance use disorder, and we can get them on a drug treatment path to get them rehabilitated so that they can come back into society and live a drug-free life. Any of those kinds of things, right? So we have the programs, and if they do their programming and they meet the statutory requirements, then they can be considered for parole. But we don't have an absolute, if you come to parole board, it's not a guarantee you're getting out. Like, it's not a guarantee we're going to parole you. And even if we approve parole, folks don't necessarily get to take advantage of that until they have an approved home plan. We do not parole people to the street. You will not see a person being paroled homeless out of New Hampshire's state prison. We make sure they have an approved and investigated parole plan, a home plan. So whether that's going to a sober house, whether that's going to a recovery center, whether that's going to live with family, whether that's folks who have worked, through the system and have saved enough money to be able to afford an apartment, and they have a job when they get out. But we make sure they have services. And the nice thing about being on parole is it eases somebody into society in a very supervised environment. So if, theoretically, a person is weighing whether or not they're going to do something that would be a mistake, they have a parole officer they can call. It's a nice safety net where if you get to the end of your sentence, and keep in mind, I think people forget, not every inmate is incarcerated for life. Most are incarcerated 3.5 to 5 years, 7 to 15, something like that. At the end of that time, they get out. It's unconstitutional to keep somebody once they've paid their debt to society. So isn't it better if you go through the parole process and you get to ease yourself into society in a supervised manner until you reach your maximum, rather than just opening the doors with no rehabilitation and say, go? And so that's kind of the way we're looking.
I guess I've never thought of it that way, right? Because like you said, you hear these folks, they have these minimum and maximum sentences, right? And someone who's in jail, we'll just pick a round number, is in jail for 10 years. And the public hears that they were paroled after 6, right?
Probably had
the first instinct is, wait a minute, you got 10 years. How come you're not paying your full penalty?
Society, yeah.
Right? Right. That we don't want you on the streets before the end of your sentence. But you make a good point. If he stays in the system until the end of the 10 years, he has to be let go.
Yeah.
Whether they've done any type of rehabilitation program or not, whether or not, if he just spent 10 years in there, lifting weights and making connections with a whole bunch of other hardened criminals and not actually working on the issues that got him there in the first place,
right,
him or her, then they're going to be dropped out onto the street, homeless or not.
Yeah, because we don't, when you reach your maximum, whether you have a home plan or not, you're going out.
Right.
We cannot
You're literally
constitutionally
just
keep
then
them.
set free on the street.
Correct.
With nothing, and yeah. That makes you make a good point. The parole process forces an inmate to go through a rehabilitative process before.
And supervised.
And then they're supervised once they're out.
Correct.
Now, does that supervisory period automatically end at the end of their max sentence?
Yeah. Well, yes. So it's whatever so again, the parole board doesn't set a sentence. That's between the defense counsel, the prosecutor, and the judge. So they set the sentence, and so they'll say, you'll get 7.5 to 15, and sometimes, like at the county jail, they can tack on 15 years probation afterwards or something like that, which is supervised. But for the most part, the end of the sentence is the end of the sentence. And so, and they stay supervised until they get to the end of their sentence. That doesn't go away. We don't take that away once they get paroled. They stay supervised, and we can revoke their parole. So every Tuesday we have revocation hearings, and every Thursday we have our parole hearings. And in our parole hearings, we look at a myriad of factors, all the aggravating and mitigating factors for, and our panel is, there's 3 people that sit on the panel. And we have somebody who's from the Department of Corrections. We have a lay person. Right now it's a surgeon from Dartmouth. We have somebody in academia. So he's a professor at UNH, I believe. We have me, and then we have another attorney. And so on Tuesdays, we have to have revocation hearings. We have to have an attorney on that panel, but on Thursdays, no. And so when we revoke somebody's parole, then they get enhanced sanctions. And so maybe we parole somebody the first time. You get out on parole, you get to your maximum, and they slip up. Sex offender fails to register, fails to report to their PPO. And I mean, some of the rule violations are not, you go out there and you murder somebody. We, God forbid, hope that doesn't happen, right? But you have a lot of rules. You have to, under some parole conditions, you're subject to a lie detector test. Our sex offenders have to register. You have to register every time it's your birthday, every time you get a new car, every time you move, all that kind of stuff, right? Everybody under supervision has to report to their parole officer on a regular schedule. If you're in intense supervision, it's every week. It could be even more frequently. If you're not on intense supervision, it could be monthly, and it just depends on where you are in your process. You have to demonstrate you have an adequate living situation. You have to demonstrate that you have housing. You have to let your parole officer know and ask permission before you move to another house. I mean, it is highly supervised. And then if you violate those parole violations stack up, and they will haul them back in and say, we want to revoke their parole and put them back in jail to finish their sentence. So it is so supervised.
So, you answered one question. I was going to ask who's on the parole board and how many. It sounds like there's 5 or 6.
We have 5
total.
people, and we have 3 for a panel. Yeah.
Okay, so there's basically 8 folks.
No. There's 5 that we choose from, and we have 5 people total assigned, and then we use 3 every hearing.
Sit,
every hearing.
And
yes.
Okay, so is it like you see in the movies? You see people sitting at a desk, and you see the potential parolee sitting across, and you're interviewing, and how about victim impact statements?
100%.
Like
we want victims there.
How does that work? And I imagine there's got to be a level of discomfort there, right?
I applaud the bravery of the victims who have to come in.
I mean, for you. Right, as a member of the parole board, I'm listening to the potential parolee, but I also have the victim family. Depending on the severity of the crime that I'm listening to, and there are going to be times when I, as a parole board, we grant parole and we say, okay, here are your conditions, and the family or victim is going to be very upset about that.
Yeah, or if they don't, a lot of victims want the person to stay their max, and there's just no, and I understand that, right?
And that's what I'm saying. So there's got to be some uncomfortable conversations that you've had on both sides.
Yeah. So with the victim or with the parolee or the inmate, we hold them accountable. We ask the hard questions. What did you do that landed you behind these walls? We want them to take responsibility for whatever crime they committed. And we listen to them, and we listen to their story, and we listen to their accounting of it. And we look for things like, is there any remorse for the victim? Is there any empathy? Is there any, what brought, how did you get here today, right? And then when the victim goes, if we hear a very different story from the victim, which sometimes happens, then there's really minimization by the part of the inmate. And then we don't grant their parole. And we tell them, you need to spend more time in rehabilitation. You need to spend more time with your behavioral health provider, with your case managers, with, in your programs, to start learning how to take accountability and understand that what you did and the impact of what you did impacts a society. And you need to understand how grave that is. And so we'll deny their parole. We'll send them back. They have an opportunity to come back in 6 months. And if they've been rehabilitated, the sad thing and I've seen this go both ways. Some victims, it's like picking the scab every 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. But they want to be there. Other people find it extremely cathartic to go in there and to be able to hear what's been said. I've heard victim impact statements everywhere from, I hate this individual, they ruined my life, there were no services for me, they get free behavioral health in jail, I get no free behavioral health, I pay for my therapist for what this person did to me. I've heard that. And then I've heard other people that say, I want this person to be well. I am a person of forgiveness, and I want this person to heal. This was a very sick person who did this to my family, and I'm forever impacted, yes, but I want so we get the gambit. You get both ends of the spectrum. When I was at Gitmo, when I was at Guantanamo Bay, that was 2022. We still had victims' families from 9/11 that would get on a plane and fly to Gitmo for every one of those hearings, because it was important for them to face the 9/11 that were incarcerated over, or detained, they were never incarcerated, over at Guantanamo Bay. And it's the same thing here. We have some victims come and say, they have paid their debt to society, you need to let them out. Right. We were young, foolish kids, and we made a lot of mistakes, and this person is rehabilitated, and you need to give this person a chance to get out and get on with their lives. And I think about, we have some people that were incarcerated, they had a 30-year sentence, and they're at the 30-year point, right, of getting out. Think about what's happened in the last 30 years. Cell phones, internet, applying for a job looks different. It's a whole new world.
There's no...
And so parole...
There's nothing familiar about it. And we see that. I mean, I hear stories all the time. Pastor Muddy comes every Christmas.
Okay.
He's our last show before Christmas.
Oh, okay.
He spent 20 years in Venezuela before he was booted out by the Chavez folks. He was he ministered to uncontacted tribes. He lived with the tribes, but now that he's back in the United States, he raised his kids down there in the jungle.
Oh my gosh!
But now that he's back in the United States, he ministers to prisons. Mm-hmm. Right? So he goes to the prison twice a week and does Bible study with the prisoners. So he's got a lot of stories, and we talk about those. And where was I going with this? Oh, he says that he works with folks, and they get parole, or they come to the end of their sentence, and then a month later he goes in, and that person is back. And more often than not, the person's back because they went out and violated their parole, but they did so on purpose.
Because they can't acclimate to society.
The world that they lived, that they were dumped into, is not the world that they left.
And that's one of the beauties of the parole process.
So he sees folks getting thrown back in on purpose because
Yeah, and I'm
I've
sure
got no
there-
place to go. They
Yeah.
dumped me on the street. I ended my, so I mugged the first person I found at the train station. So,
No, you do see. I mean, I do think there are people who, especially people with substance use disorder, they are oftentimes, most of the time, they are paroled to a sober house for 90 days. And they are given, the MAT, they're given Suboxone or methadone to kind of get them through their DTs, which most of them start on that in prison anyway. So they get through the physical part of the DTs, and then they get their behavioral health services for their disorder. Because remember, substance use disorder is both a mental illness and an addiction, right? I mean, addiction is kind of a mental illness. That's why it's in the DSM, right? That's why it's a medical diagnosis under the psychiatric DSMs. And so they get that treatment, right? But some folks can't handle that, or some folks, or they were more comfortable in jail, believe it or not. And so they will use, knowing that they're going to get caught because they do urinalysis tests. And if you use, you're coming back. And so, but to get to the point about the people who have been in jail like 30 years, who have been incarcerated for 30 years, they have to be able to work themselves out of the system. So you cannot be paroled if you're a higher category than C3. So the jail is C5, C4, C3, C2, C1. So C1 would be like the Calumet House, or it's the work transition housing, right? It's a community housing, Shea Farm for women. Then you have C2, and that's like the transitional work facility that's located on the prison campus, but it's a different building. Then you have C3, those are people in general population. You're not even eligible until you reach C3 or below. So people who have not worked their way through that part of the system don't even get an opportunity to be heard. So I don't want people to think that, as soon as you get to jail and you get to your statutory 2/3 of your minimum, you can apply for parole. You can't, not if you haven't worked through the system. And again, we don't make the rules. The legislature did. The legislature wrote the parole statute. We didn't. And so we are bound by what's in the statute. Then they also have to be disciplinary free. So when you are incarcerated, you get D tickets. So if you, and it's tough, you have somebody else's property on your bunk, you're getting a D ticket. You rip a sheet, you're getting a D ticket, or you're getting a disciplinary ticket. Now those are graded. If you start a riot and you've got a shank, you're getting big time. That's an A category of a disciplinary ticket. If you have done something minor. But if we see a pattern of people who are getting these disciplinary tickets, we don't parole them, because that signals to us that they can't follow rules. And then I need to know that you're going to stop at the stop sign, and that you're going to not shoplift, and that you're going to follow your parole officer's rules, right? And if your parole officer says you're going to call me every night at 5 o'clock, I need you to demonstrate you can follow that rule, as silly as it is. But if you can't even follow the rules in the jail, then we don't have any belief. And the statutory language that guides us is I have to have a reasonable, this is a quote, reasonable probability that you will succeed at liberty outside of the jail. So the standard is,
right.
I have to believe that there is a reasonable probability that you will. So if you've been not following the rules in jail, I don't have any probability that you're going to follow the rules outside. And so we'll deny their parole.
So these programs that the inmates can participate in, I know people who work at the state prison. I know people who have been through the system. These programs exist at the state prison. There's educational programs. There's Bible studies. There's schools. There's libraries, there's books, there's all kinds of programs. There's even work programs.
Yeah. Have you ever been over there and seen some of the woodworking that goes on over there?
No, but I've seen the woodworking.
Oh my
I've
goodness.
seen some of this stuff.
There are master carpenters over there.
But is that only at the state prison level? Like, for instance, here in Manchester, we have
Valley
very
Street
large,
Jail,
and
yeah.
Valley Street is a very large and sometimes notorious, county facility. Does the county facility, do the regional facilities have these?
Yes,
Because
they have.
my understanding is that if you're in one of these facilities, you're still kind of waiting for trial, or your sentence is under a year. Like you're not someone who's going to be incarcerated for a long time at that facility because your sentence is either too short to bother sending you to the state prison, or you're still in the process of trial and pretrial. So how much of these programs exist at all of these regional facilities?
So I do know that there are some similar programs to what are offered at the state prison. There's a program called SOAR, and I believe that is some behavioral health, and it might have to do with substance use. So there are some programs. I'm not super familiar with the programs that are offered at the county, House of Corrections, but I do know they have some programming, and they do have some services and some behavioral health services, and they get probation out of there. And so there are probation officers, and I'm sure there's case managers that do something similar to what happens at the state prison, but I don't know exactly.
So the parole board is you work mostly with this, or only
with the state prison. So we have the women's prison, the North facility, and we have the men's prison. Then we have the TWC, and we have all the community, the Calumet House and the community services that. Thought I lost my thing. All the community services, the community housing, halfway houses.
Yep.
So we monitor those, and the people are paroled out of those. And what we like to see are people who do come from, like Calumet House, because you have to earn your way all the way down to a C1. Right. C1 isn't given to you. It's not a time-based thing. You have to earn your way to a C3, C2, C1. And when you earn that, then what they do is they charge you rent. So, and I don't think folks know this. So if you are in a C1 facility, you go get a job and you have to pay rent. And so you are responsible for finding your own way to work. Nobody drives you there. Whether you take the bus, you can ride a bike. Most of them don't have a driver's license. Maybe depending on the situation, you may have to pay for an Uber. But then you earn your money. Your money's put in a bank account for you. You have to pay for your lodging at the halfway house. You still get your services. They will give them a cell phone, but the cell phone is highly monitored and very restricted. And when you come in at night, you give them that cell phone, and they will open it up, and they will look at it, and they will find out everything you called, every person, every place, and you have a geo-tracker on you. So if you were supposed to go from the Calumet House to Chipotle to work, or wherever you work, and you you go over here and visit your girlfriend, they know it, or boyfriend, they know it. And as soon as you get in, you get a disciplinary. And that disciplinary keeps you from getting paroled. Yeah. So,
you mentioned that we don't parole folks, like obviously if they reach the end of their sentence, they are just
that's not parole. That we can't monitor them. We can't do anything. They have paid their debt to society that the court ordered for them, and they're gone.
And we don't know.
No, the only thing that will apply is whatever's in their minimus. So if the court says, at this point you're released, but there will be a forever protective order for your victim, or whatever, you have to. They'll give you conditions for release. So maybe if it's a person who's a habitual offender and a DUI, they may make them put that breathalyzer on their car for 18 months to start it, or they may, something like that. We have a program called Batter's Intervention Program, and so they'll require within 7 days of release the Batter's program. And so that's for our domestic violence folks. So the court can put conditions like those, and they'll have to do those to meet their court conditions. Maybe restitution, they have to pay the victim back, something like that.
No, I think you hit it on the nail earlier when you said that a lot of people have this vision of parole as someone's just getting off part of their sentence. But like you said, parolees are not homeless. They can't be homeless.
Now, they may become homeless, but that's a parole violation.
Right.
Okay, so, and we do have that. We see it on the streets, right? But no.
Well, that's one of those things, if someone's been in the system, they may not have a place to go, even if they've worked their way out and they've gone. Like
that's what their case managers do, though.
Right.
They help them. They have case managers that, because a condition to be released is you have to have a home plan. The case managers work with them to try to help them get a home plan. So, it becomes really tough for the sex offenders because a lot of places don't want to rent, so it's hard to find an apartment, and so you may have to go live with a family member or whatever, and so they do a home visit there and try to determine, and that's pretty intrusive on the family, right? You've got some stranger coming in your house and saying, well, that gun can't be here, and you got to lock up the alcohol, and we can't have this and that, and get somebody in your home, like inspecting your home. But no, they're very, very, we just will not release somebody without a home plan.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, that, again, that perception of someone just being let loose is...
That's the people that reach the end of their term that haven't been through parole.
Yep.
And then when they reach the end of their sentence, they go. Yeah. But, so we have hearings every Tuesday and Thursday. Revocations are on Tuesdays. Thursdays are parole hearings. They are open to the public. We do limit the number of people that can come in. If somebody wants to come as a concerned citizen and see, obviously a victim would get, we have such limited capacity in there, the fire marshal would kill us if we had too many people in there. So if victims and their families are there, then we have to limit people. But the parole schedule, a lot of victims are like, hey, I didn't know my person was being paroled, right? And that goes out 30 days in advance, and we put it on our parole website. Every person who is scheduled for a parole hearing or is put on our parole website. That's NewHampshireParoleBoard.com or New Hampshire, just Google New Hampshire Parole Board, and click on that, and you can find the parole schedule. You can see who's being paroled, or who is being scheduled for a hearing, right? And so a victim is on notice. We do every scheduled, when somebody is scheduled for a hearing, which, like I said, is 30 days in advance, we reach out to all the victim advocates at the prosecutor's offices and let them know who's on that list, so that if they have victims that they need to notify, they can notify the victims. So the victims do have an opportunity to come back if they want to. We don't turn any victim down. We let them be heard. It's very important for the board to hear their impact. We have not paroled people since I have been there based on victim impact statements. So we do listen. We listen very carefully. I am very, very respectful of the fact that it takes a lot of bravery to come in that room and sit with a person who has violated you in some way, shape, or form, and to share your side of the story and make sure that they are heard. We put a lot of value on that. We recognize that victims are forever traumatized, and so we want to make sure that they are validated, and respected, and we do want them in there if they want to come.
Now, like in the movies, do you make your decision right there?
Yes.
On the spot?
Yep.
Decisions made. Is it like a vote amongst you?
We vote. We vote on the computer. There's 3 of us. We don't always agree. A vote goes back and forth. We have a lot of conversations. Sometimes it's, the probation, the PPOs know, the probation parole officers, they know their parolee very well. They know them inside and out because they spend so much time supervising them. And so when they revoke their parole, for example, and they come back, they will give us a recommendation, like revoke their parole for 90 days. They just need a reset. Or revoke their parole to the end of their sentence. I mean, I've seen those. Revoke their parole, like this is your 9th time at the parole board. They don't get another chance, right? And so, we look at those, right? And we listen to them and we pay attention to their recommendations. So sometimes a debate goes on, on the, like somebody will say, hey, I really think this person's parole should be revoked for 5 years. And then somebody else is like, that's really excessive. It's a first parole violation. Our statute says 90 days. The statute says 90 days, but it is a discretionary board. So then we're like, let's look at all the mitigating and aggravating factors that led you to that 5-year, decision. And then we kind of work our way and we noodle through it. And we look at the law. We look at, at the victim. We put all of that goes into the gonculator as we make the sausage and make a determination of what is an appropriate amount of time. We do also have the beauty of a thing called a Rule 408. And so we can bring people back, and that is a work through the system. And so they then are put on a pathway of working through, scheduled programming, getting them back into a rehabilitation program, getting more different kinds of monitoring, and then we work them through the system so that we can kind of rehabilitate them.
Which of the two types of sessions is more difficult or more emotionally taxing on you? The parole hearing or the revocation hearing? Which one do you dread going to?
I think the parole hearings are the hardest for me because the revocation hearings are, we trusted you, we gave you a chance, you went out there, you messed up, so now we're bringing you back. It's a little more mechanical because that's bringing them back. It's when we have the parole hearings, especially when the victims are there, because some victims feel very strongly about not wanting that person back in society, and sometimes I feel like they don't understand the whole picture. Mm-hmm. And so if we do grant parole to somebody, and there are times, we've granted parole to a person, and we're like, we hope we made the right decision. Like they checked all the wickets. It feels like they're going to be okay, based on their behavior in jail. But you just don't have that. Like,
well, you don't get to know these people. I'm sure that you get a file and you can thumb through the file before the hearing and whatnot. But you haven't met this person until this moment. You haven't.
But I can tell you when they're sitting in front of you, a good example, when I say to them, you're here to ask us to grant you the privilege of parole. Why don't you tell me what you've done, right? Tell me what you did that landed you behind these walls. And if they start out with, well, I was charged with or I was indicted on blah, 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 but I didn't do it.
It's over.
It's over. Like, or if like you have a person who say there was an assault of some sort, and then they say, well, the other person had a black belt in karate. They could have beat me up. They didn't. Okay, don't blame the victim. Like, I don't want to hear victim blaming either. Like, you are not taking accountability for your action. You need to take accountability for what you did. And so those are kind of easy because we know that they need to go back into the system. We need to put them in the programming. And the program, when I talk about the programming, like the sex offender treatment, the SOT, is, from what I understand, I haven't been through it, but from what I understand, it is extremely, they break you down to your most vulnerable point, and then you have to spill everything, the details, the literal details of what you did, why you did it, what made you do it, where, I've had people tell me in the parole board that they disrespect women because the Army taught them that. And I'm like, you are talking to the wrong girl. I was in the military 36 and a half years, and never once when I was in the military was I ever in a situation where I had somebody in charge telling the men disrespect the women. So don't buy your story today, right? So you'll hear it all, but I think the paroles are really hard because we are basing our judgment on their behavior in the jail going up to this time, weighing in the balance the seriousness of their crime, weighing in the balance, the way they're presenting themselves today. And some people aren't good at, it's an uncomfortable conversation. Some people just are not,
sure it is.
It's hard. We see a lot of tears.
The worse the crime, the more uncomfortable it's going to be.
Right. And then the victim input, right? And then we make a decision, and we hope that we make the right decision. You never know for sure, right? Until they get out there. We've had people that were wildly successful on parole, and now they're coming back asking for a reduction in their maximum. And so people who had like a 30-year maximum who were paroled 15 years ago, for whatever reason, because they get paroled at their minimum, right? For 15 years, or for the last 10 years, have had a squeaky clean record, and they're just asking for a reduction of their maximum so they can get on with their lives. Is that a you got to make that decision.
Right. And
we got to weigh, in our mission statement, public safety is one of the first things in there. We have to be concerned about public safety. Are we doing the right thing for the public? And we do take that very seriously.
Here in New Hampshire, we have some politics taking place. And you've been in New Hampshire politics. You were a state rep.
Yes.
You ran for CD1?
Two.
CD2?
Two.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
I get them mixed up.
That's okay.
It's 50-50, right?
Yeah.
This time around, we have 3 open seats.
Well, let's see. Senator Shaheen's, Chris Pappas's.
Both of the congressional districts are up for grabs because it's, we've got an incumbent running, but they're up for primary.
Oh, yes. So right. We have CD2, CD1.
And we have the Senate seat.
And the Senate seat.
Right, so we got 3 races going on, 2 of which are open seats technically.
I know.
Although we have an incumbent from CD1 running for the Senate
seat, right.
So there's some name recognition there. He's hoping that he can basically take this as an incumbent. But we've got to start sending folks to Washington.
Yes, we do.
We've taken care of step 1. We've got the state. We've got both houses. We've got the corner office. We've got the executive council. What do you think about this race?
So, I do think, I think that we have some really rock-solid candidates. I really do, especially in the Senate side. I think we have, a rock-solid candidate for that, and he's polling very well right now. And I do think that he's got a good shot, really good shot of, representing us in the Senate, and I'm very excited about that. And then I think we have some really, really good candidates. I don't live in CD1. But I do know a lot of the candidates, and I think we have some really strong candidates in CD1. Now, whether, I haven't seen any polling out of there yet, other than amongst the candidates. Yeah, we're early for polling.
This is critical for us. We need to send, of these 3 seats, we need to grab one of them.
But I will tell you this, we as a party, here in the state really need to coalesce. We need to do a better job. I see a lot of fringe groups that are trying to grow some legs that are Republicans, but are as nasty as, they're very hateful.
I've seen some of that as well.
And we cannot be hateful to our own selves. We're all in this together. People always ask me, are you Republican, are you Democrat, are you an independent, what are you? And I'm like, I'm an American. I'm an American who cares about this country and this state. And first and foremost, I am an American. And act like an American. I try to live my life every single day worthy of the young men and women that have gone before me and lost their lives in these wars. And so, and I don't think, smack talking, people that are aligned with my values, or, it's okay to pick the candidate you like, right? The one who aligns most with your values. But this, I don't want to use bad language, just crap talking about each other is gotten out of control. And we've got to coalesce as a party, as a country. I mean, we've just got to do better. We're Americans, for the love of God. When I'm at the Pentagon and the President Trump got to be president, 50% of the Pentagon, the hand-wringing started. Oh my God, we're going to hell in a handbasket. We have had.
Did it happen?
No, we've had a president for 250 years, and every 4 to 8 years we get a new one. And 50% of this country hand rings, and guess what? you know, on election day, I'm going to still wake up an American, and I'm still going to have my freedom of speech, and I'm still going to get to carry my gun, and I'm still going to get to call myself an American and live in the greatest country in the world. So stop with the rhetoric, you know, just stop being so nasty and negative.
Yeah, I agree, and I've had that conversation over politics. I've had it over family anxieties, family emergencies. I've had it over people, you know, got laid off and weren't expecting it. And I'm like, everybody just level set here, right? Yeah, there might be some financial issues here. There might be, you know, some job issues here. But the fact of the matter is, no one's going to die, right? There's still going to be a roof over my head tomorrow night, and there's still going to be food on the table, right? We need to level set and just be realistic about just how far this is going to go. Like you said, the hand wringing, oh, so-and-so got elected, right? It's just...
But you know what? And
the doom and gloom has got to stop.
Yes, and if your candidate does not get elected, then you need to work that much harder. You need to, like... Regardless who is president of the United States, I have served in the military under every president since Ronald Reagan. I didn't vote for some of them, but you know what? I didn't give up on my country. I kept my head in the mission. I kept supporting this nation. I kept my pride in America, and I just kept moving forward. And when I thought the policies that they were putting in place were bad for this country, I voted extra hard and worked extra hard for a candidate that aligned more with my values, right? And the tide does turn. Are we over time?
We're getting there.
So, you know, I just wish people would start thinking more in that mindset of...
We've been trained by the media and the powers to be to hate each other if we don't align 100%. If there's a single subject that you're passionate about that I'm not, I'm supposed to hate you for it. And so we need to get past that. That wasn't the case 40 years ago. You know, things were still going to hell in a handbasket 40 years ago, but we weren't hating each other over it.
Oh, so, I know.
That's it. It went fast.
Oh, thank you so much.
For coming, Lynn.
Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks. You look great. You've really worked hard, and you look fantastic. Good for you.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you next week.